This was brilliant. It was the crowning moment of brainwashing. Imagine, like you're 17 years old and you see something like that. It was the first time that I think my classmates saw pictures like that. And two of the most horrifying exhibits were not pictures, but one was our girls started crying. And now comes the part where our communist ideology was very deeply implanted in us. There was a room where some people. This was brilliant. It was the crowning moment of brainwashing, which started very early in kindergarten already. And, it was age appropriate, but there was always, we had little cartoons, we had fairy tales, and there was always the underlying ideology was always communism, and that the world will be a better place once we erect the workers' paradise on Earth. And this was under the leadership of the Soviet Union, our big brother, and the Communist Party in East Germany, which had come to power by that time. Junior year in high school. Now, in those days, high school was reserved for only the top 10% of all students. Only the best students were allowed to go on to high school for 4 years. The rest of them would go on for another 2 years and then learn a trade. You went to high school, you were guaranteed to get a spot at a university someplace, unless you failed high school. So we're talking about the future leadership of the country, and it was mandatory that in our junior year we would have to make a trip to a concentration camp. And usually the most popular one was Buchenwald, because it was just outside of Weimar, which, you could combine the two. Weimar was one of the cities where there was where our literary icons operated together, Goethe and Schiller, and it was a city with a lot of culture. So we would go to visit Weimar first, and then we went to the concentration camp, which was just outside. And we expected that this would be unpleasant. So as we were on the bus, when we left our town and went towards Weimar, we were all singing, and I had a guitar, so it was fun, and it was just fun. But as we were going towards the concentration camp, we were silent. And that silence was very justified as we walk into the big rotunda, the big hall where they had a lot of exhibits, including big pictures and large pictures on the walls of piles of corpses. It was, it hit us imagine, you're 17 years old and you see something like that. It was the first time that I think my classmates saw pictures like that. And two of the most horrifying exhibits were not pictures, but one was, there were a couple of shrunken heads. They were the size of my fist. These had belonged to real people. They were in glass cases. And then there were also several lampshades with interesting art on them, and we were told that they were the lampshades were made from human skin, and it was the wife of the commandant of that concentration camp ordered these to be made. She would look at incoming prisoners and would single out the ones that had tattoos, and they were killed and skinned. So our girls started crying, and we were just hanging our head. And we also had to go visit the gas chamber where we were told what happened there, and the crematorium where the corpses were burned. And yet now comes the part where we where our communist ideology was very deeply implanted in us. Okay, because there was a room where some people that incoming when prisoners were killed by being shot in the back of the head, and the whole idea was there was a wall where they had a sort of a sliding scale that could measure your height well, and it when it reached the neck, a hole opened up in the back, and people were shot that way. Okay, and we were told that the leader of the Communist Party of the German leader of the leader of the German Communist Party, Ernst Thälmann, was executed that way, and that was only a few weeks prior to the end of the war. He when Hitler came to power, he and a few other communist leaders were arrested, and he was put in jail, and he spent all the time in jail until they put him into that concentration camp and killed him. And it's a historic truth that before Hitler came to power, the communists were the only force that fought the Nazis in the streets physically. Nobody else had the courage. Now, does that mean that if the communists had won the fight, they would have been better? No. It was just two dictatorial type forces. But we knew that the communists were anti-Nazi, so much so that they gave their lives fighting against the Nazis. And we, East Germany and the Soviet Union, we were inheriting the legacy of the communist fighters. And now comes the kicker, when in fact it was known at the time that in the western part of Germany, West Germany, there were Nazis, ex-Nazis in the government. And the one I told you about, the fellow who became the head of the Bundesnachrichtendienst, Reinhard von Gehlen, was co-opted. He was in charge of intelligence on the Eastern Front for Hitler. He and his entire group was co-opted by the CIA under the name of the Gehlen Organization. So it was clear that there were Nazis in the West in the West German government, and they were supported by the United States. So we were going to continue to fight the Nazis. What happened here, that the United States government actually committed an unforced error, big time. The denazification in the East was radical. The Soviets either put them in jail, killed some of them, or iced them so they couldn't have any positions of power. And in the West, the U.S. government thought, it would be okay to continue with some of them, because, as a defense against a potentially aggressive Soviet Union, and B, to help rebuild the German economy and so forth. It was a mistake. It was a big historic mistake, and that wound up in the radical segregation of East and West, and it wound up, being the focal point of the Cold War. Sorry, this is hindsight. You never know how I would have decided, assuming that I had been old enough and being in a position to make those decisions. So I'm just saying, it turned out to be a mistake.
Yeah. Well, it's a pretty good recruiting tactic and an angle to take to get people indoctrinated.
Yeah, they weren't necessarily very smart, our leaders, but they were clever.
What's up, guys? Thank you so much for taking the time to watch the interview. If you got anything out of this video at all, please like the video, leave me a comment, tell me what you thought of the video, tell me who you'd like to see on the show. I really appreciate the support. It goes a long way on these platforms, as you guys know.